In 1988, 2% of all African Americans had a drug arrest in the United States in that 1 year. Pretty shocking. That's when you hear people talk about, the war on drugs unfairly impacting certain communities. Well, there's a statistic for you. So hold that thought. But we're going to talk about something else. Well, then all comes back together at the end. Devil's Night, the Bronx is burning.
Detroit firefighters are bracing for Devil's Night. That's the annual pre-Halloween arson spree.
A number of heroes emerged this morning in a tragic fire at 575 East 165th Street in the Bronx. But the fire department didn't come until after all the people had jumped out.
Wasn't no fire engines at all. We was the fire engines.
These are two famous examples of things getting crazy in cities in America, in the so-called ghetto. In the 70s, you had was a very good documentary out if you're interested in it called Decade of Fire, but there's a lot of information about this. The South Bronx became infamous around the world. That's why it was the most famous ghetto in the world, because all these fires, all these giant tenement buildings are burning up all over the Bronx, and it was losing population at just a tremendously fast rate.
It is characterized by empty shells of buildings that stare out hollowed-eyed, and we are seeing the flight of the citizens into the West Bronx and into the East Bronx and the North Bronx as the area becomes bombed out. Housing stock is perhaps the most acute problem in the Bronx today, as a severe shortage is being caused by a number of factors.
All the movies that were coming out, the Charles Bronson Death Wish, and the Warriors, and
Vice President of the Young Sinners,
Vice President of Young Saints,
President of Young Cobras,
War Council of Young Saints,
Vice President of Young Cobras,
War Council of Majestic Warlocks,
Vice President Warlocks.
Who was at the motherfucking fight, man, when Black Benji got struck down, when he was hollering like, wow, why should we all fight, man? We all black and Puerto Ricans, huh? When they fucking hit him in the head with a pipe, man, and while he was laying on the floor, they said like, wow, Black Benji, all he came out of his mouth was said like, wow, man, why should we fight, man? You understand?
The gangs that you heard of, the Savage Skulls and the Black Spades, and of course the birth of hip-hop. This is all out of this cauldron of urban decay, which South Bronx was the center of, in the media. And a common theme I'm talking about now in all these stories I do, or a lot of stories I do, is the crime as a spectacle that keeps our attention and, what's really going on behind the surface. So I'm finishing up this documentary we've been working on for over a year, Behind Street Dreams. It started out kind of like a Motown Mafia 2, but I didn't want to just do that. So talking about the Brown family, which is from Motown Mafia, but also a lot of the socioeconomic context of crime, specifically African Americans in the United States. And so I've been doing all this research, and I've come to the realization that while it's easy, and I'm the king of talking about some 1972 Harlem heroin conspiracy, and all that stuff is interesting and exciting and entertaining. But I was just talking about it with El Chapo's son taking a plea agreement. Are people like that actually the most dangerous and destructive people in society? Take, for example, we're talking about the South Bronx and Harlem. Those were places in the 70s you could drive and see all these burning buildings, or you could turn on the news and see all these burning buildings, and they would show you film of, there's so much drug activity, they fill the whole block, and they're buying blue magic and all this. So all that stuff was real, but
the conditions, the filth and stuff out here is one of the reasons why the people don't care no more. The average person, they get high and they don't have to worry about it.
The alcoholic does not have an economic dilemma. He doesn't have to raise huge sums in the course of his day. $1 or $2 will suffice, and anybody can raise that in our society. And yet, We have maybe 8 million alcoholics in the United States, most of the non-functioning alcoholics in the ghetto. If you go around the streets in the South Bronx, you will see hundreds and hundreds of young men and women all dressed up, no place to go, drinking out of a brown paper bag, drinking beer and cheap wine, permanently narcotized on this drug, the most abused drug in our society, alcohol. And really, as a policeman, I'm going to say something that is really a bit shocking. That alcohol is probably my greatest ally, because I'd hate to think what my police problems would be if all of these young men and women were not permanently narcotized by alcohol and were expressing their energies and their frustrations in a more direct manner.
I used to be up and down the same street, going in and out of these same cellars, using narcotics. The known shooting gallery right down in there. This is where I hang out. A haven for drug addicts, wine drinkers, billheads alike. They all, one is a bar, the other one, that's why they get along so.
For more hard-hitting historical analysis like this, and celebrity gossip, and street news, subscribe, Al Prophet. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Worse people than the drug dealers make money off the ghetto because it's a gold mine of money-making opportunities. And let me define the word ghetto for you. Ghetto, people throw that word around and use it interchangeably with slum, or even sometimes people will just call the area that has a lot of black population the ghetto. But that word is a legal designation. It comes from Europe in the when was it first used? Maybe the 1300s, but it was used for hundreds and hundreds of years. It was the legal designation of the place, mostly in in Eastern European countries. I'm not sure what language ghetto comes from. Is it Yiddish? It was where Jews had to live. The ghetto is where Jews legally were required to live. So when you use that term, the ghetto, as opposed to just a bad area, the slum or whatever, it's not really the same thing. Slum is a rundown area where people that can't afford anywhere else to go and live. If you're living in a society that has actual ghettos, where people are legally forced to live no matter their income or anything else, well, that's a whole lot different. And up until relatively recently, pretty much black people were living in the ghetto, because if you weren't, no one would rent you an apartment or sell you a house in other areas of a city, or in fact, there was actual segregation laws. That's an actual ghetto. So what does that mean economically? Well,
he wants us to pay rent. He don't want to give us no service. So right now my kids they didn't go to school today because we don't have no water. You can take your bath. We called him yesterday and he says that if we don't give him the rent, he's not going to do anything about it. We know he's not going to do anything about it. He just wants to get the money and go. And I told him yesterday that not to expect to get any rent from the building and no tenants in this building. So we don't have no choice. We have to fight for our lives.
This here is one of the buildings that I used to own about 6 months ago. I'm on title, but because the redlining, landlords are not able to get money to rehab these buildings, and they become vacant. And then in order to bring them back to be livable, you need maybe $30,000 or $40,000 per unit, when they could have been saved if the owners were able to borrow $1,000 or $2,000 when the deterioration started.
All these buildings, landlord is walking away.
Condemned.
It's walking away. That's condemned. And I believe, really, when I moved in this building here, they said that the landlord died, but the people were still collecting rent. And some agent took over, like the other gentleman said, some agent took over the building, and I kept on paying rent. Somebody told me that this guy here was collecting rent, and nobody owned the building. So I just...
Let's go all the way back 100 years. Harlem in the 1920s. By the 1920s, Harlem had more black people than St. Louis, Birmingham, Alabama, Memphis, 3 black population centers all put together. That's how many people had moved up there already by the late 20s. And an analysis of rent in New York in the 1920s found that black residents paid 50% more for the same amount of rooms, for the same amount of square space, often in buildings that weren't fixed as well. The landlords were less responsive because they didn't have to be.
About 73 and close to 74, he stopped fixing this, that, or the other, stopped painting. Some of the tenants refused to pay rent. This made the landlord angry. Sooner or later, fires broke out. Only one, maybe a month, maybe 2 a month. Later, it became every other day or night. You can't move here or there except from ghetto to ghetto, with nothing but fun.
It's very, very dangerous, man. You know, especially for the South Bronx, man, for the poor people, man. Sometimes my wife even can come out of the house at 8 o'clock, man. That's the position that we live in, man, that we have to go through with it.
You have the rise of slumlords who actually, you don't hear this talked about much anymore. You did a little bit when I was young and when I was in graduate school. Like Thompson, the director of the unit, and others were going after slumlords in the city of Detroit, and they got some of them convicted of felonies, I think, for or at least misdemeanor assault. Because if you got a letter to abate lead paint in the home you owned, and you didn't, and a child got lead poisoning, they were trying to say, well, we're going to give you an assault charge.
Because the stairs is all broken up, the doors is knocked out, and up and down the stairs, you're afraid because there's so many old apartments is empty that I'm just trapped in here.
There was a lot of money to be made. I mentioned the fires in the South Bronx. There was a lot of money to be made in ghettos, destroying the physical infrastructure and getting the insurance payment.
If I have to pay a bank, for instance, $50,000 a year because they overmortgaged a piece of property, and the property only brings in $100,000, and I have to pay $25,000 to the city collector for the assessment, at that point there's very little money left for the variable expenses, such as repairs, maintenance, fuel, etc. So I've got to cut it from somewhere. Otherwise, I've got to stop paying the bank so they foreclose. If I stop doing repairs, the tenants don't pay any rent.
On April 25th of last year, at 4 o'clock in the morning, 2 individuals were apprehended in Bronx County. They were operating an automobile which had a defective tail light, and they were stopped for questioning. We found that these 2 individuals were individuals known as a Mr. Oberlander and another individual. At that particular time and place, they wore disguises. Their faces were smeared, trying to give the indications that they were black individuals, when in effect they were white individuals. I think that what's significant about this particular case is the fact that these individuals had on prior occasions, on 21 to be precise, collected insurance claims totaling something like in excess of $105,000 since 1970.
The state sets up an insurance pool so they can dole out policies in places where it's impossible to get a fire insurance policy. Landlords would kick back money to these insurance brokers who'd come in and look at an abandoned, half-burned out building in some neighborhood in the Bronx and say, oh yeah, it's worth $100,000 easily. And everybody got paid, everybody got kicked back.
The state insurance pool paid out $10 million in 1974 alone. By the end of the decade, the insurance company Lloyd's of London paid out over $45 million in claims. That would be around $250 million today. And those are just the payments I could find records for because of a federal investigation.
So the idea that, gangs like in the Warriors or something, were going around and burning down all the buildings, well, maybe a little, but probably it was mostly the owners of the buildings because they got an economic benefit. And as I've gotten older and know the type of people that own businesses and stuff, if you're the type of guy that has earned owning an apartment building or some big piece of land, like you take money very seriously, and you're not just going to accept a loss. You'll destroy infrastructure to get your money back. I mean, some people will. You got to be ruthless in business. And while everyone's attention is on the drug dealers on the corner because that's wild looking and whatever, there's all sorts of other predatory crimes going on behind the scenes that are probably more destructive, like the slumlords sucking out people's income, not even fixing up the place where they live, all because the people can't move anywhere else because they're legally or otherwise, meaning de facto or de jure, so they're de jure means by law, so you're legally segregated. Back in that legal segregation, people could only rent in certain areas, and de facto just means, well, legally you can rent somewhere else, but no one will rent to you. Did you know that up through the late 50s into the early 60s, there were people using outhouses in cities like Chicago and Detroit, some of the old neighborhoods that before urban renewal, which is a sobering thought. Can you imagine living in a tenement in Chicago in 1959 and you gotta walk outside down the stairs in the winter to use a bathroom in an outhouse? Pretty crazy. So in Detroit, of course, in the 80s and through the maybe mid-90s, you had the famous, you might have heard about it from Eminem's song, Devil's Night. That was when there would be thousands of arsons on October 30th, the night of October 30th, the night before Halloween. So Halloween night is the 31st, Devil's Night is the 30th. I guess it was a custom. You go around in egg houses or put toilet paper. Well, in Detroit and some other places, I think in New Jersey, like Camden, New Jersey, and some other places, they had it bad too. But
Detroit firefighters are bracing for Devil's Night. That's the annual pre-Halloween arson spree. Last year, 281 blazes were reported. City officials are taking steps to try and stop the fires. Youths under the age of 18 will be under a dusk to dawn curfew tonight, and more than 35,000 volunteers will watch vacant buildings and patrol neighborhoods with fire extinguishers.
So many abandoned houses and buildings in Detroit. And when I was about 5 or 6, I remember it as that we set a garbage can on fire and it caught a house on fire. My father claims it was only the garbage can. But I know me, my cousin, and my father, when I was 5, set something on fire. This is how, normalized that type of behavior was. But so there were people setting stuff on fire in Detroit. But I'm sure that just like in the Bronx, lots of Detroit property owners that couldn't get rid of their building or their home used the cover of they knew the news was going to show. Because, boy, if you could be transported back to the 80s and see the nightly news, it would seem kind of crazy because there was a very, very noticeable that you're going to turn on the news, and one of the things you're going to see every night, they're going to be sure and show you black criminals, and make it seem like that was the main problem of society.
And we're pawns in a game of chess that we don't have no direct contact to the player.
We've been written off in terms of narcotic addiction when we've had one narcotic substituted for another. So that the blacks and Puerto Ricans, all of whom were thought to be muggers and robbers and guilty of street crimes, are now allowed to stagger around the city in a semi-comatose condition. They don't need rehabilitated housing, so the authorities think.
As you see from that statistic I quoted at the beginning, 2% of the entire black population caught a drug charge in 1988. That's crazy. I mean, that's when you factor in all the old people, all the very young people, many, many people that aren't involved in any, don't even go outside, right? So that, and that probably means if you were living in certain neighborhoods, probably half the adults caught a charge that year. Now, nowadays, they don't really enforce the drug laws like that because it's just been a losing battle, but They used to raid my whole block. They would come on both sides of the block, shut it down. Everybody outside got put on the ground, and the only way you could get up and leave, you had to show your driver, because it happened to me, you had to show your driver's license that you lived on that. They be like, oh, okay, he lives on the block. And they'd be like, go in the house. Everyone else went to jail. It took everybody to jail just for being over on my block. Like, there's no reason for you to be over here, except you buying and selling drugs.
With the spreading deterioration and the growing desperation both of the owners and the tenants in the South Bronx, we've seen fires, some caused by owners, some we think caused tenants, some we think caused by sheer vandalism, as the area lost its cohesion in great part and lost its community spirit.
With different supers and associates of mine that I've been in contact with, I've known that landlords have hired them to burn buildings down after the buildings are vacant, to burn them down to the ground.
For those of you interested in, instead of just the exciting parts of crime or whatever, the titillation of it, of thinking about what's went on in our society and where is it going and why things are falling apart. There's a lot of predators in capitalism. The dope man, even if you think a drug dealer is bad, and maybe they are, I'm not here to defend them. But whatever it is you think about, some of the people I do my documentaries on it, I've become friends with, the Courtney Brown family, junior and senior. If you think they're bad, then many people running corporations, slumlords in the same neighborhoods their heroin was getting sold. There's worse people than either. If you think they're bad, then you'd have to say, well, the people that are owning these rundown apartments that they don't fix and they're taking people's money, they're even worse. That's why people got stuck as society opened up and people could move out. The reason a lot of people didn't have nothing is because all through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they couldn't move, their money was they were paying more for less, which is crazy when you think about it. And they didn't get a chance to take advantage of the newly built construction going on in the suburbs, where in the 60s in the 50s in Detroit, you could get a mortgage on a newly built house in a suburb that was cheaper than the rent on an apartment in most of Detroit. But not if you were black. So think about that. So who's really the predators? And as you saw from that thing about the South Bronx, it was a lot of money, billions of dollars probably, in arson payouts. So that woman found $250 million in today's money. Remember, she said that's just in that was stuff uncovered in one federal investigation. That was not an exhaustive list of all the payouts. That was one probably like indictment or investigation or something. So if it probably was into several of billions, it had to be. Billions and billions of dollars just in insurance payouts. Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes didn't stack billions of dollars. I mean, that was as big of a business as the drugs, but you don't hear about it because it's a little more intricate. There's nobody, the criminals, they don't look like how you're trained to think of a criminal. That guy was a white businessman. But as we're seeing with the unraveling of our society, all these things we used to believe in, I think it really started to kick in with the Catholic Church scandal, where you said, wow, like, this is one of the pillars of society, and you had all these people that were doing all this stuff to kids, and this just went on all around the world for decades? Whoa. What's really going on? And then we've seen so much corporate malfeasance. Nobody trusts the corporations. Sports is shady, right? Didn't they teach you sportsmanship when you were young? Well, come to find out. Listen, I kind of lost a lot of respect for American journalism. Like anyone that has anything to do with sports and they get dressed up in their suit and they talk all serious, miss me. I ain't got no respect for no sports reporters. Like, or no, none of the coaches, owners, when they all acted all shocked when the baseball steroid scandal hit. What do you mean they were on steroids? After they made all that extra money, because there was all that excitement about breaking home run records. If you don't y'all that remember and know about sports, you know about that. When Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and all them and Sammy Sosa were torching Roger Maris's record, like, I did it suddenly at the age of 40, I'm getting bigger and more muscular. I'm hitting more home runs. I'm better than ever. Not only am I not, it's one thing, you're able to keep your skill and not decline. That's good, but you're getting better. You're better at 38 than you were at 28 in sports. Come on now. They all knew what was going on, but the money was rolling in. So this is this play acting that we do in society where everyone knows what's going on, but then when it comes to a halt or someone gets caught or something bad happens, then we're all supposed to act and pretend to be shocked. Cynthia's on drugs. Really? Come on now. So this was a little all over the place, but it wasn't too all over the place. But to summarize, and what you should take out of this is crime, and watching it keeps us occupied and thinking that the problem is one thing, and it's not that those are fake, people running heroin rings and crack houses is, antisocial, but what about all the other stuff? What about things that are worse, that suck more money out of people's pockets? Did you know there's a single Camorra clan? The Camorra is organized crime around Naples, Italy, as opposed to the mafias in Sicily and Ndrangheta's in Calabria on the east coast in Puglia. What the hell is their name? Castellanese, something. One clan, which is just a group of families. They're estimated at $40 billion in assets. It ain't from D-Rugs. I mean, a little of it is. It's from, if you guys are into crime stuff, I hope you've seen the movie Gomorrah. It's based on a book written by an Italian journalist. It's nonfiction. It's about the Camorra in Naples. He's lived with 24-hour police protection for the last 20 years because of that book. Just recently, people still threaten him about that book. It's an international bestseller and made into a movie called Gomorrah. It might have made into a series, but watch just the movie. Because the movie is shot in a lot of the places. It's shot in the Scampia, which is a giant housing project in Naples where stuff is really going on. Biggest drug market in Western Europe. All these things you might, in your head from just news stories, associate with things that go on in America's ghetto of, teenagers in tracksuits and mopeds with big bags of dimes serving people. That's what they're doing in the Scampia, in Italy, and all over Europe. Like, none of this stuff is unique to where you think it is or even started there. It's just, that's what you've been trained visually. That's why white criminals are so effective in the United States, because we're all trained to not, you look right past them. You don't think, not that, couldn't be them. That's not how that's not what the drug dealer looks like in the movies I watch, and that's where most people get their information. Most people aren't really out in the world doing anything. Most people are with your family, with maybe people at school, people at work, a few of your neighbors. You don't know what's going on. You're reading a newspaper article, which is frequently propaganda or false information. You watch the TV shows and movies, which is entertainment. It ain't even meant to be truthful in the first place. And they're just going to give you whatever catches your eye. We all know the phrase, the algorithm now. Well, the algorithm has always existed. So they discovered the algorithm in the 70s during the era of white flight. You want to get a lot of people watching the 6 o'clock news? Show black muggers every night and interview an old Jewish woman who they took my purse. People found that entertaining. It reinforced their pre-existing beliefs. It wasn't fake, but there was other stuff you could have put on the news, like all the slumlords burning up the Bronx and stealing everybody, or getting being able to charge inappropriate rent. Turning the ghetto into a red light district so that when the mafia wanted to dump its heroin and then later the cocaine, these were the distribution points, because you already had areas where everyone's used to being victimized. So they don't call the police. The police don't exist for them. This is where you go to get a prostitute, to get drugs, to sell drugs, to prostitute yourself, to sell stolen goods, to buy stolen goods. You go to the ghetto, and the people there were often paying more in rent. Oh, you got a felony? Oh, we can't do a background check? Oh, well, higher rent, deposit. We ain't fixing nothing. It's capitalism for you. So today's phrase is predatory capitalism. Our profit America, though.
We've got a real need to see the Department of Interior with Recreation and Parks, and obviously HUD would be the key agency, and to see which of this can be salvaged, which of it ought to be torn down and recreation areas instituted. And then once we decide to renovate block by block, we just need to concentrate forces here.
Forces were never concentrated. President Carter pledged $55.6 million in aid for the South Bronx. 16 months later, New York City's Board of Estimates voted to kill the South Bronx's 6-year, $2 billion plan.
Almost 3 years ago, after speaking to the United Nations, President Carter came down here on Charlotte Street to look at all of this, and then said that this was going to be a symbol of what the government could do for the city. That I know now there is no program or promise that a president can make that the federal government can come in and wave a wand and do this.
Don't get frustrated.
I support
if you're frustrated now,
that
you
kind
can't
of
do
legislation.
It.
Look,
Okay.
if you will listen for a minute, what I'm trying to tell you is I can't do a damn thing for you if I don't get elected.